We work hard as physicians to take care of the health and well-being of our patients. But when it comes to our money, do we have the same condition of care? Probably not. Let's change that together. Welcome to the Financial Freedom for Physicians podcast, where we'll fight and advocate for your financial literacy. As always, I'm your host, Dr. Christopher Liu. Thanks for being here. Let's jump into the show. Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode, and I've got a fantastic guest for you today, Dr. Steven Sideroff. He's a clinical psychologist, but he does so much work around resiliency, mindset. It's going to be a fascinating discussion, how to get the most out of life. I'm really happy to have him on the show. So, Steven, welcome.
Thank you, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I know we had connected through Podmatch and kind of, set the stage briefly, talk about what you do, how you got there, and how the audience can benefit from your expertise.
Certainly. I've always been interested in peak performance, optimal functioning. And very early on in my work, I realized that one of the things that gets in most of our way in becoming the best version of ourselves is how we deal with stress. And stress is a common modulator of so much of what goes on in our lives, because as we increase the amount of stress that we have, and that's happened to all of us, our coping mechanisms begin to get stretched and frayed, and we don't think as clearly, and emotions get caught up in our thinking process, and we don't perform at our best. So I've developed a model of resilience and peak performance that really, once it's based on a model that has 9 components to it, and people that follow my program find that they are more resilient, they avoid burnout, and they perform at their best. And so this has been a joy of mine to help people really reach their full potential.
Yeah, what a fantastic introduction. And so, we'll kind of get into it, because I know you've written a book as well, and we'll talk about that and how the audience can find it. What's really interesting is, when we talk about peak performance and, because, for example, one of my colleagues, she's a psychiatrist, and she chose to specifically work with Olympic and NFL athletes. So what is your typical client? Is it the high performer, the CEO? Is it kind of like, just kind of someone needing better emotional coping mechanisms? Kind of describe that for the audience.
Certainly. Well, you mentioned athletes, and I've worked with a lot of Olympic and professional athletes on their peak performance. And in fact, I've learned in my work with peak performing athletes, I've learned a lot about how to help executives, physicians, and other professionals be peak performers. And it's about having a growth mindset, a mindset in which anytime you identify a vulnerability of yourself, a weakness of yourself, a shortcoming, that instead of just settling for it, you go, okay, how do I learn to get better at this? And that growth mindset, it's a combination of a growth mindset and embracing challenge. So a lot of times something difficult comes up in our lives, and we sort of shrink from it, or we say, do I have to do it? Okay, I'll do it. And I encourage people to, when there's a challenge in your life, to embrace it. Okay, I want to handle this challenge, because when I do, I learn and grow, and I'm better for it. And this is why I've actually debunked this myth of resilience being the ability to bounce back. And I say, no, resilience is the ability to bounce forward. That every time you engage in a challenge, and we do every day of our lives, you want to come out of it with, what's the lesson that I learned from this experience? What did I demonstrate to myself about myself that I can own so that the next time I handle a challenge, I've grown my capacity and I will handle it even better.
Yeah, I really love that description. And so kind of the next question I have for you is for example, a lot of high level like surgeons and CEOs and executives, and then whenever it's like a pressure performance and kind of there's like I was listening to this podcast where the pressures of just Olympic athletes and just so immense. And how do you handle these pressures, these choke points when they say that they're either clutch or choking? How do you handle that?
Yes. Well, good question. And when the pressure is on, in a sense, it's too late to start learning how to handle pressure situations. The key is really to practice and be prepared. The key is what I do, whether it's an executive, an athlete, or a physician, I actually do a lot of dress rehearsals with them. So I set up the circumstance, the conditions of a stress, of a pressure situation, of a important moment in their lives, whatever it might be. It could even be doing surgery. And we visualize it in full five senses modality so that I help the person go right into that situation. And while they're there, I coach them in how to stay calm and focused. Because that's, we have this tremendous mismatch between our stress response and the environment that we live in. We still have the fight or flight stress response, yet all the situations we engage in do not necessarily require that. And so we mobilize much more than we need. And so the dress rehearsals are trainings for balancing out the appropriate stress response for the circumstance. And that's a key to peak performance. That's a key to avoiding burnout, is having a stress response that matches the stressful situations that you all encounter. And it's training to be in a sense of calm during those moments. And that's at the heart of what's referred to as being in the flow. It's also at the heart of what's referred to as being in the zone.
Yeah, which kind of a follow-up question is, how do you help individuals that failed on a massive level, like for example, like a hedge fund trader loses, hundreds of millions, or a CEO gets, fired, or just like somebody just like, or an athlete just, botches a huge opportunity. How do you keep them from from spiraling, at those when the stakes are so high?
And not an uncommon circumstance. And in fact, if you're going to be a peak performer, you have to learn how to handle those kinds of situations, because success is never just a straight path like this. There are always going to be the failures. And so the first thing is to recognize that these situations produce a lot of emotions: anger, frustration, loss, sadness, all of those things. You can't just push them aside. You have to start by accepting those feelings, acknowledging them, and allowing yourself to express those feelings. Even if I'm angry with myself, I need to, that when you're angry or have any kind of emotion is the root of emotion, meaning that your body mobilizes with emotions. So they need to be addressed as the first step. So I will encourage and coach the people I work with to get those feelings out. Express the anger, express the sadness, let it all be okay that you have the feeling, because feelings are not right or wrong. If they're there, they need to be dealt with. So that's the first thing, to find a way to express and release those feelings. The second, and that includes a sense of loss, that, in your examples, there's a tremendous sense of loss. Again, it's part of the process of letting go, is to allow yourself to go through all of those feelings. Mm-hmm. The second step is to find the lesson to be learned. Okay, so a mistake results in a cost to us. We need to now find a lesson that's of value to balance out the cost, so that, as I said before, we're bouncing forward. So as I said before, you want to come out of these experiences with additional learning and knowledge, so that you're less likely to make a mistake the next time, so you're more likely to be successful the next time. So those are the keys to how you address and let go of a mistake, of a loss.
Yeah, really fascinating. And I'm reminded of my own failures that, there's this kind of, you have to kind of remove yourself and just kind of, the people that you trust, and then you have to kind of modulate your self-talk, because, your mind will go in all these different directions. If you're anxious or you're fearful, it'll concoct all these different stories, and it's kind of so we talked about optimal performance. One thing is talking about is a lot of for example, the audience are doctors or dentists or high performers, and a lot of these it's very rare that I have a colleague that didn't have a traumatic childhood, either like divorce or bullied or outsider, or all these things. So how can individuals identify and break free from harmful survival lessons learned in childhood to achieve optimal health and success? Like, how does this translate? Because a lot of these doctors are doing it because they want to prove that, prove to some because something happened when they were a kid, and now they have to like show, and it's kind of like this negative directed mechanism.
Well, that's a very good question, and it touches on my first pillar of resilience, which is our relationship with ourselves. Before, we were talking about the fifth pillar and sixth pillar, which was mental balance and mastery and emotional balance and mastery. But now let me address your question by talking about the first pillar, which is our relationship with ourselves. And there's two aspects that what your question touches into. One are the wounds and hurts of our childhood, and then the lessons of our childhood. And I like to say that these lessons gets funneled into our internal voice, the voice we hear 24/7. So that voice, in a sense, is the representation of all of those lessons. And so it's important to start listening carefully to the messages that we give ourselves. And you alluded to how we can be hard on ourselves. We could be critical and judgmental. And that's part of the consequence of the lessons of childhood, is being hard on ourselves, too critical, too judgmental. And I like to say that the first step is to begin noticing those messages that we give to ourselves. Now, we can wonder, are they right? Are they wrong? And we really question it, because it's sort of like, does a fish know that it's swimming in water, right? It's the only thing we know. But here's the key. The key is to identify what the optimal internal voice sounds like. The optimal internal voice, it comes from a place of love, acceptance, compassion, support, care, and joy. Those are the hallmarks of a healthy internal voice. If we think in terms of having an internal parent that's telling us what to do, and we could look at those old messages, you want to begin comparing them to how a healthy internal parent would talk to you, and look at the contrast. Because usually we're much too hard on ourselves, much too critical. And people will say, oh, but, shouldn't I be, if I make a mistake, shouldn't I be hard on myself? Shouldn't I put myself, beat myself up for it? No. And here's the key. All of us are someplace in our life's journey, right? Here's our journey, all of us, right? And all of us are somewhere along this line. Let's say we're here. Most of us, when we're here, feel we should be here. I should have done it better. I shouldn't have made that mistake. All of these comments are giving ourselves a message that where we're at is not okay. We should be here. So that's undermining. The first step in growth is to accept where you're at. Doesn't mean I love it. Doesn't mean I'm okay with it. It's just a reality. Here's where I'm at. Let me own it and be accepting, because acceptance is the fastest way to get to where you want to be. And so to answer your question, that's a long way around to answering your question, which is holding the intention to identify our existing internal voice and then have the goal of migrating over to a healthier internal voice coming from those qualities that I just mentioned.
Forget the burdens of tenants and toilets. Equity Multiple simplifies your investment journey, letting you invest passively embedded, professionally managed commercial real estate. Only 5% of reviewed investments reach Equity Multiple's platform, with our asset management working on each from funding through exit to maximize your returns. Whether you're on the couch, in your exec chair, or the backseat of a ride share, Equity Multiple brings cash flowing real estate investments straight to your fingertips. All investments involve risk. Visit equitymultiple.com to learn more. Really very insightful. And it's like, because it's kind of like set the stage, your 9-pillar model of resilience, but these very emotionally charged, these negative events, very harmful patterns, or when you fail, when you choke, these are really important concepts that you're laying. So kind of next is
let me add, you see, the more we are accepting of ourselves, the less likely we're going to choke. We choke because we're going against this. Am I going to be good enough? Am I going to do it right? It's all of the messages from over here that tighten us up, literally, and make us less capable of responding in an optimal way. You want to be coming from an accepting place that allows for that calmness that I talked about before, for us to perform at our best.
Yeah. And then I love this idea. You talk about neuroplasticity and the path to longevity and positive aging. So, what are the most critical factors for longevity, positive aging, and also maintaining this neuroplastic aspect of our lives as we age? And because people say as you grow older, you become more set, but I've been reading this really great book talking about, you can really, with meditation, it can help frame your awareness and your perceptions. Talk about that.
Sure. So we've been talking to some degree about the powerful force of our childhood patterns. Very powerful, because when we are born, we're in survival learning, and survival learning means, how do I get on the good side of the people who are supporting us? That my survival is dependent on my primary caregivers. So we adapt to their environment. We don't go around sampling hundreds of families to see what's the best approach to life. We assume that little family that we grow up in is the representation of the world. And so we adapt to that. But because our childhood early learning is survival learning, our neural networks, our neural circuitry get formed based on those lessons. So we adapt to that, but then our adaptation to some degree freezes to those lessons because it creates a filter through which we see the world and through which we see ourselves. Okay, but juxtaposed from the powerful childhood lessons is our brain's tremendous ability for neuroplasticity, to learn, to grow, and to literally regrow new nerve cells based on new learning. But we have to be willing to let go of the old lessons. That's the key to neuroplasticity. Because these old lessons, they're like a gravitational pull. Okay.
Yeah.
And so to have neuroplasticity and new nerve growth and development, it's so important to be consistent with practicing these new lessons. That's why in my book, I talk about the path. So many of us say, learning is so overwhelming. I have to do this, I have to do this and this. And if you think about our history, we have this whole history of the old pattern, and now today we're trying to do a new pattern. Neuroplasticity works if we're consistent. So right now, you and I in our conversation, we're literally triggering in a 30-minute impactful conversation, we're literally triggering new nerve growth in our brain. Amazing. That's neuroplasticity. But for change to occur, we have to be consistent with that. And so I like to say that the path is alongside us every day, but we have to always take steps to get onto that path based on my model of resilience. So neuroplasticity is an amazing potential of our brains, but we have to engage in that process by doing, like, for example, by migrating over to the healthy internal voice, by thinking in terms of a growth mindset, and by taking the challenge every day to learn to do things in a new and different way.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was just talking with another guest about forgiveness and letting go, and then it's kind of like forgiveness and letting go. It's a process. It's not a one-time event. It's not just like you just let it. It's kind of like a muscle, just like neuroplasticity. It's like kind of rewiring, but it takes you have to do it over and over to like train it. It's like mental conditioning. So I know.
I like to say, it's like you're approaching this forest and all thickets all over, but there's this one path that's trodden down, beaten down, and we automatically go there because it's the familiar path. And I say, wait a second, stop, pull out your machete and go over where is the healthy, good path and start knocking down those thickets. And the way that works is anytime anybody in your audience feels uncomfortable, feels a little anxious, feels a little nervous, perhaps going into a meeting, for example, or going into some other experience, I guarantee that the discomfort is coming from some unspoken message from your old internal voice saying, are you sure you know what you're doing? Are you going to be good enough? Are people going to judge you? So the discomfort we experience is triggered by some message from that old voice. That's a signal to stop when you feel the discomfort. What's the message that I'm giving myself? And then what would a healthy internal voice say in this moment? So following that path, that process, you can be learning and growing on a daily basis and dealing with those old messages on a daily basis. It's waking to that moment of, okay, what's going on right now?
Yeah, I love that. And I know we have so talk about you have a book that you have, and then talk about what it is and how people can find it. And then lastly, how can people follow you and, reach out to you about these important concepts?
Sure. So, I've distilled all of my work with peak performance and executives and all the people that I've been working with down into this model of resilience, the 9 pillars of resilience and success. And that's in my book right here, The 9 Pillars of Resilience, the Proven Path to Master Stress, Slow Aging, and Increase Vitality. Because when you follow this program, you literally bring your nervous system into a better place of balance. And when you do that, the body does a better job of healing and slows the aging process. And I followed this model. In fact, the model is based on the lessons that I've learned. And last year, I did my biological age assessment, and it came out 20 years younger than my chronological age. So that's the promise of what other people can achieve by becoming more resilient, improved performance, and improved health. This book is available everywhere, Amazon, any bookstore, and people can reach out to me. My website is drstephensideroff.com. A lot of interesting articles, some pioneering research I've done using neurofeedback to literally heal the brain and achieve peak performance.
Yeah, and what a fantastic way to end the conversation. And let's thank Dr. Stephen Sideroff for coming on and talking about this mental performance, mental longevity, and resilience in the context of performance and healing, and all of his. Be sure to give his socials a like and follow. Check out his book, The 9 Pillars of Resilience. It's on Amazon. Get it, leave a 5-star review. And with that, thanks so much for coming on.
I'm excited that you made it for another episode. You are truly the best. If you've been following the show for a while, you know that my passion is to bring you the education you need to find your path to financial freedom. Please come back week after week for new content, new resources, and great guests. Until then, if you haven't already, please be sure to check out the website, www.drchrislewmdphd.com, for more support. I'll see you next week.